Good evening, friends. Welcome to Average Folks in the Afterlife and part 3 of our examination of Frederick Sculthorp's 1961 Excursions to the Spirit World. Many seem to think that every trip to the next world must be full of excitement, with many new wonders and strange things to be seen. But this is not always so. In my early projections, I was taken to the low or unprogressed states many times, and as these are just like Earth and the inhabitants do not know anything otherwise, the activities were often banal and boring. But I had to learn. Many times I have felt the necessity that all should have some knowledge of spirit life already during their earthly pilgrimage, as do I. For instance, it did not seem very edifying when I was hurried to a dull state to listen, and invisible to them, to the conversation between two charwomen in the middle of a deserted school playground. They were school cleaners and were full of grumbles and bitterness towards another charwoman who had the job of cleaning the school, which they considered should have been given to them. This is the plane of illusion, with all its drabness, and I should hardly think that any spirit children went to that school. This, however, would not seem strange to the cleaners, as they are concerned only with empty schools. That reminds me of that old saying, the only thing that a thief sees in a saint is his pockets. The spirit factories I have seen were all overstaffed with work people, and there was no system or production line. Each one seemed to be doing something that either he knew best or wanted to do, and all were content to be in a regular job. It is interesting to note that, although the ingrained thought of work is uppermost and is carried over by some, so is the lazy habit of, quote-unquote, having a mic. And I saw plenty of it round the benches. A place where there were no foremen would be no doubt a worker's utopia. Near Christmas, I once projected to a factory in spirit where I watched some men painting children's toys, and it seemed that the early thoughts of the festive season are reflected in the next world. Outside the factory, there was a large sports ground in the middle of which they were erecting a big and substantial-looking stage. As I was wondering what this was for, my guide quickly remarked, "For the workers' amusement." On 2 occasions in this world, where thoughts are things, I have seen butcher shops. In a land where the slaughter of animals is not possible, this may sound surprising even to those with some knowledge of spirit. They are purely the result of thought and look just as substantial as anything else. Where thought reigns, who can put a limit to thought? A simple point, but it's all engulfingly important when you're talking about the astral plane. I have discovered over a number of years, and I hope some of you aren't too disappointed to find this out, anything that you can think or imagine about the astral plane is true, because even if it's an odd thought or an unusual thought or a surreal thought or an almost impossible thought, numbers of people, dead human beings, have gone there and manifested that thought long before you had it. Just think of it. Think of all the, well, if you want to use the artists types, you know, the surrealists, the Dadaists, the situationists. Then go farther back into clowns of hundreds and hundreds of years ago who would do funny, weird things for the court just to amuse them. Think of all the religious mystics. Think of all the highly imaginative, just ordinary people who would fantasize about things. all that is manifested on the astral plane, all of it. Now, it may be manifested in small areas and tiny amounts, but it's there. It's all there. There is nothing that you can imagine that is not existent on the astral plane somewhere. This is an incredibly important point. I want you all to think about it. It's really... Now, it may be useless. It may not be terribly functional. It may not be very educative. But it is people, human beings, dead human beings, manifesting their thoughts. Because that is what happens on the astral plane. Thoughts are things. Maybe messy things, maybe contraptions that look ridiculous, but they're manifested. They were simply the earthly life ambition of the butchers to have a well-stocked shop, capable of satisfying all their customers' demands. They were small shops, and the entire fronts were hung with meat, just as we used to see before the new food laws were introduced. That would be the new food laws of, I don't know, the 1950s, I guess. The colour of the meat was a brilliant red, and in one case almost the hue of crimson lake, which was, perhaps, their idea of perfect meat. This plane of illusion in which many spirits live for long periods may seem strange to many of us on earth, but those of us who have sat in rescue circles will know of many cases where a spirit, on being told that he or she has passed over, emphatically denies it at first. This is one of the reasons why rescue circles are held by spiritualists, trying to enlighten those backward spirits. Rescue circles, 6 or 8 people that are well known to each other and meditate together regularly, come once a week or whatever and do the meditation, and there's usually one that's a stronger passive psychic than others, and they create a light, an energy, a light that draws wandering spirits to them. And then the one that is communicating, one of the 8 or 10 or whatever, does the talking. And if you read a book like Lord Dowding's Lishgate, there are many accounts of that, where and that was done during the war when people were dying every 3 seconds, the World War II, that is, and endless numbers of people will swear up and down, backwards and forwards, I am not possibly dead because I feel so much more alive. And it just goes on, and they argue black as white for the longest while. In an interesting experience connected with those still living in the plane of illusion, I became once conscious in a projection on a deck of a full-rigged sailing ship of the 19th century. I had been planted near one of the great masks, and I was becoming aware of things. I was surprised at the number of ropes coming down from aloft, and the term "knowing the ropes" acquired a new significance for me. I walked over to a deckhouse close by, and in it were a few men all grumbling over their living quarters. I sensed that they thought they had not long left port and had been put in the deckhouse. I looked in it and saw the bunks and told them it wasn't so bad, but they would not be consoled and were thinking of possibly stormy weather ahead. It would have been interesting to ask the men when they last saw a storm or did a night watch, but I was not impressed to, perhaps because it had been tried before without effect. Certainly their grievances would appear real, as the place was not a good teak-built affair, but more of a ship's carpenter's emergency job, and did not look very weatherproof. But one could no more tell these men that they were spirits than the man in the street could be convinced in a few words about his life in the beyond. I've had experiences like that, and one of which I told a poet friend, David McFadden, about it. He wrote a poem about it. It was a gas station or something that blew up here in the Toronto area a couple of years ago. Well, maybe more than a couple. Let's say it was 10. And it blew up very suddenly. I think it was a gas station. I'm saying gasoline, but I think it was gas that blew up. And 1 or 2 buildings were completely demolished, like instantly, and 2 or 3 people were killed, I think. I'd have to check the details. I'm only remembering because I reread David McFadden's poem just the other day since he passed, and I did a little homage to him in my poetry show. But I projected there, and they were all in a thought bubble. Nobody had, they all died instantly, and their instant reaction was to create a thought bubble, unconsciously, of course, that perfectly recreated the physical plane resemblance of the buildings, and none of them knew they were dead. And as I recall, I did my usual stunt and convinced them, I think. Although it's a while now, but this notion of coming across people who are living their little miniature reality, and not just one person. There was a few people there. I don't mean 20, 3 or 4, and you can't convince them that they're dead. They don't believe you. I can't remember if I actually did or not. Now I don't know if I may not have written about it, because I often write about these things and they wind up in the books or in videos. And I'm not sure if I wrote about that one, because I've been doing them so long. I was, thought, oh, I've written about that enough. Can't keep going on and on and on doing it. Same old thing. But I did, when I read about it in the paper or whatever, I knew right away that that's what would have happened, because when it happens suddenly, people are just, they're so shocked that some sort of automatic mechanism kicks into place and they recreate, the thought bubble. Another one was that the airline that was shot down by the people in Crimea when they were having that war. And the investigation eventually said it was the Russians. So a Russian rocket that did it. Of course, they're denying that they did it. But I checked out that one, as I'm sure other rescuers did. We probably all recognized the same. When it happens suddenly, people can't cope. And I mean, I found people floating in the air. I found one guy, he was like working on his computer, laptop, or and he was floating through the air in his seat, and I think he had the thought bubble of the plane around him. But I didn't see it. I just saw him floating in his seat, and there was a few people like that, and they're just kind of flying through sort of psychic space. That's maybe the vibrational upgrade of the physical place in which the plane was blown up. So anyway, this is incredibly common, and only people that do this work sort of know it. And just a little addition there. To repeat, one could no more tell these men that they were spirits than the man in the street could be convinced in a few words about his life in the beyond. And very true that is too. In my early projections to the lower planes, I was often taken to a place just in time to witness some occurrence, and it seemed as if my teachers were fully aware what was going on to happen. Also, I found myself waiting outside in an office with a feeling that my spirit helper had gone inside for orders, that I would be made unconscious and hurried to the spot. Yeah, guides often seem to, they know ahead of time. Spirit people often know about things ahead of time, maybe not years ahead of time, minutes or, and it's never been quite clear to me how they do this, and I've just accepted it that they do know that. When I did that, it's an old video, and the massacre in Mumbai, and I forget who was killing who, Muslims killing Hindus probably, or maybe it was the other way around, I can't remember. But it made the news at the time because it was well executed, and gosh, about 110 people got killed. And when I did a retro view of it, that's where you go backwards in time, just like he went backwards in time to the sailing ship. Again, not hard to do once you figure out how to do it. A retro view a few days later, I found that the spirit guides of the people that wound up dead, although they were in public places and there was no guarantee that, this person would be there. But I think the spirit guides were following the perpetrators with their thoughts and their plans, and obviously trying to talk them out of it. But, hey, don't do this. It's not a good idea. But they were determined and they did it. And, but then all these other spirit guides were ready to do the retrievals. And many people were retrieved in just a few seconds. And because it was well organized. I don't think I actually retrieved anybody. No, I didn't. But the the sense of it all being taken care of ahead of time and people being whisked away rather quickly was paramount. And also, I did follow the tracks of the dead perpetrators, and they went to wherever their colleagues were on the physical plane, hidden somewhere, maybe Pakistan, I'm not sure, and doesn't really matter where, and sort of partied with them, like, yay, we did it, hooray, 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 you know, kind of like you imagine the ISIS guys doing. But it makes you realize that people will do the most ruthless things and celebrate about it later because they feel they're in the right. And that leads you to a further understanding that basically everyone feels that they're in the right. Whether it's unionized workers going on strike, teenage boys breaking windows. I mean, everyone's got a rationale to do what they want to do, and it always winds up being, we've got a grievance, but we're in the right. We're right to have this grievance, and that goes right down to all these people that, you know, get in a bad mood and then get out of it by killing a few people. It's just a virus, this righteousness virus. I can't get over it, but it's there, and it goes on all the time. Anyway, enough of that. In the dull astral towns, I often saw certain men neatly dressed in ordinary clothes, but their features and eyes had a brightness and perfection that made them outstanding in such a locality. I sensed them to be advanced helpers on their various missions, and once I saw the protective powers they possess. I was suddenly taken to one of these towns stationed in the middle of a marketplace. A man, a Negro, was standing on a box addressing a crowd, and he seemed well pleased by his ability to keep the people amused with his jokes and antics. One of these helpers was passing by, and the man saw him. A look of intense hatred appeared on his face, and he called to him with a coarse expression. The helper stopped and turned to him with a grave look and said, "Do not insult me." The result was surprising. The man collapsed as if all strength was taken from him and disappeared from view at the foot of the crowd. The helper went on his way and turned a corner. Soon the man struggled to his feet and saw that it was quite safe to shout a further insult, and then resumed his antics with the crowd. On another occasion I was put in the middle of a miserable-looking street, which I thought was a part of London of the 19th century. I saw a sad-looking little peddler going from house to house with his bag, and watching him was a proud and petulant-looking Victorian dandy, still with his side whiskers and in the clothes of his period. Suddenly he strode over to the peddler and deliberately stamped on his foot. The peddler cried out in pain and clutched his foot. As he did so, his boot disappeared, and I saw that he was grasping his bare toes, which were bleeding. I confronted the dandy and said, "Why did you do that?" He turned away, muttering, "He annoys me." I looked towards the peddler. He was recovering from his upset, and his boot reappeared on his foot. Then he picked up his bag and continued on his round. The incident of apparent injury and pain surprised me, but the explanation I sensed from my helper was as follows. The stronger mind overcame the weaker and wished to cause pain. The peddler thought he was hurt. He wanted to grasp his toes and automatically obliterated the boot. The pain was such that he thought there must be blood, so blood appeared. On my intervention, the thoughts of giving pain were diverted from the peddler, and he quickly recovered. This expectation and producing is very strange. Once I was waiting outside the office in the lower state I had previously mentioned, and there were several others waiting. Forgetting where I was, I put my hand in my pocket and got a cigarette, lit it up and puffed. It tasted horrible, like a burning rag, and I threw it away in disgust. A young man standing by me said, "Try it again." I replied, "No, it is only an earthly habit." The strange point about this incident is that, if my expectation produced the desired cigarette, why did it not also produce the desired taste? Or did my guide play a trick on me? Later I remembered that I saw no flame on my lighter, nor had I ever seen a consuming flame in spirit. Perhaps the ethereal substance in spirit, being an original element, cannot be further broken down, and this may also be the reason why one never sees decaying vegetation in spirit. Maybe. I'm not and not remembering any decaying vegetation that I saw, but you wonder, I mean, I haven't been to astral rainforests much, but there's a lot of decay there, like constant, because it's so damp and hot. And I wonder, anyway, I've been to lots of forests, but I can't immediately think of a rainforest. I'll have to check that out. I was taken to another dull and unprogressed state and saw a group of people waiting outside the door of a long hut. A teacher conducted me through the people and the closed door. This always surprises me in the lower places because I never know when I'm visible. Inside the hut were long tables with rows of plates. Each plate had one slice of bread with a small portion of jam on it. I was told that these people had been some time in spirit but were quite ignorant of the fact, and the meagre ration was an endeavour to wean them from the desire for food. Outside at the back of the hut, a dowdy-looking woman was attending to a portable boiler. She was smoking it. She was smoking it with wood, and smoke was issuing, but I could see no flames. When a low cloud of smoke whirled around us, I said to the woman, "It looks like a house afire. I expect you have a good fire brigade in this district." The implications of this remark struck me sometimes later, but my conscience is quite clear. I am sure I was prompted to this remark by my helper. When I sat on a box, a very small boy sidled up to me. He smelt as if he'd been rolling in a sewer. He wanted to talk to me, but I hurriedly said there was not time. When I looked at his face, I saw that he was not a boy, but a wizened old man with a stunted spirit body. Many years ago, I was taken to a very dull state, so dark that it was almost like dusk. There were miserable-looking buildings like warehouses, and one I saw a line of servicemen handling their kits, which were being stacked in piles. I was told that they were passing into a better condition. I approached one soldier I had known on earth and asked him if there were any more of our men there. He was startled and frightened and looked wildly round, and then I realized he could not see me, although he had heard my voice. Being invisible, I have often been walked through. This has no effect on the spirit body. I have mentioned before that many of the lower states are inhabited by people with similar predominating thoughts or tendencies who gravitate to the same approximate wavelength in spirit. This main thought is very strong and noticeable when entering such a state. One of my most distasteful visits was to a town inhabited by those unfortunate people with quarrelsome habits. I was put down in a street and, as usual, sensed the quality of the place. It was dreadful as I looked around, invisible to them, and I saw people violently quarrelling. As my awareness became more of the state, my spirit body received their thoughts. They were vicious, pitiless, and murderous. It was a hopeless place to be in, as each individual's nature was worsened by the collective thoughts of the whole. I could not stand it and said, "Oh, take me away." My guide at once moved me, and we arrived at the outskirts of the town, a bare gravelly place, and there I saw a collection of hutches for pets, like mice and rabbits. Asking what these were for, I was told that these people had no love for their fellow humans, but would sometimes be fond of a pet. They were impressed, to keep pets in the hope that some sort of love would grow from it. A good idea. A very good idea. This state is the negative of what existence should be. Consider the lot of a person whose life on earth has fitted him or her for this state or wavelength after passing over. What little love there is taken away, swamped by the mass thoughts of other people, which reminds one of the question, "For he that hath, to him shall be given, and he that hath not, from him shall be taken even that which he hath." Well, that's potent. Don't know if I agree with it, but, he's got his POV. Thought is easily received by the spirit body, and the stronger the thought, the more effective it is. When two sincere friends meet on a pleasant plane, each will radiate a thought of pleasure which will be received by the other. Each recipient's pleasure is therefore doubled, and the returning thought is consequently doubled. This multiplication of the original thought many times at electrical speed gives some idea of the happiness on some places. When one realized the application of this same law to the dreadful state I have described, where the thoughts of hatred are exchanged, the consequences can be imagined. Once, while projecting and becoming conscious, I found myself sitting down outside a small house. I could not sense any vibrations denoting the conditions and seemed to be insulated from them. Suddenly I was picked up and given a bandy chair, two crossing hands that make a seat for another. This situation made me laugh because I could hear my two helpers laughing, and I had my arms around their necks, but I could not see them. They ran me round the house and left me in front of it again. As I was wondering what it was all about, one of them, now visible, came out of the house. I asked him what place this was, and he said, "The land of low thoughts." He began to conduct me, and I saw what appeared to be a dreary, endless marsh. My insulation had apparently been removed, for the place seemed to smell like a town's sewage works. Here and there were sad-looking people, some slowly walking, some standing still. The vibrations of this place were wretched, and I realized why my spirit helpers had enlivened me by that bit of fun in my arrival. I was not kept long and was, as usual, taken to a bright plane before returning to the physical body. This was necessary, as my spirit body has been exposed to these low vibrations, which are liable to remain for a while, owing to its tape recorder powers, which retain these conditions. Should I, in return, ponder over an experience on a low state, the same vibration can be felt with this bad influence, although in a lesser degree. There are many such places in the lower vibrations, and their description is depressing, but the facts should be known. When discussing this sort of thing with other out-of-body retrievers and rescue workers, I've heard many tales of places people go to sort of cheer up after they've done their little shift on these lower levels. Some people talk about fountains, renewing lively fountains where you stand under it and the spray sort of takes all the lower vibrational crap from you and refreshes you. That's one of the things that people have told me. And I've been in situations like that. There's rivers that you can swim in, different things like that. I had projected, and when I became conscious, I found I was running in my tropical service uniform. The toughest part of my life's memories, war service, had been chosen. The state seemed to be the lowest I'd ever been taken to, and the vibrations were mixed and very worrying. In my journey, I was penetrating deeper and deeper into this low state, and its appearance got gloomier, with miserable-looking houses. Twice I was halted to enable me to note the inhabitants, who were viciously brawling amongst themselves. One man whom I knew on earth walked through me. His state and spirit did not surprise me, but I was glad I was now invisible. My pace became slower. I appeared to be nearing the lowest depths of the place, and no one was visible. I was halted in front of what appeared to be a grey-looking warehouse with a door. This opened, and I was made to go forward, but I was halted by the awful vibrations that met my spirit body. Inside I saw a number of individuals, perhaps 100, who were slowly walking about. Their clothing, which was nondescript, hung around them like festoons of dirty cobwebs, and their faces were dull grey. The inside of the place was also grey. There was no colour, and only a dim light penetrated from above. Wretched as the scene was, it was mild compared with the vibrations I felt. Each entity was walking slowly with a bowed head, taking no observable notice of anything. All their thoughts had the same dreadful tenor. We are here forever, and there is no hope for us. Sort of a hell realm. This dreadful thought seemed to be true, and I could neither detect nor was I impressed with any redeeming feature. I seemed to have contacted history. 1,000 years would be their yesterday, and their tomorrow too, in eternity's boundless time. These vibrations were the lowest I have ever contacted, and I was glad when my guide quickly withdrew me. These entities were all walking without taking any apparent notice of each other or for any direction. Some may understand when I say that they moved like negatively charged particles, each seeking to avoid each other. After many visits to the lower state, it becomes quite obvious that they are all a repetition of the many different ways in which ignorance during earth life can place a person in his or her particular position in spirit. The earth life has formed a vibratory spirit body which must naturally gravitate to that vibration in spirit. There are no mistakes. God's laws are absolutely fair. Who can complain when one's own self is both judge and jury? Well, for myself, I'd eliminate the thing about God's laws. It's more accurate to say the earth life has formed a vibratory spirit body which must naturally gravitate to that vibration and spirit. It's a like attracts like. Its vibration goes where it's harmonized. And until you alter that vibration, you're stuck in that harmony. And that's not got anything to do with God. That's just the way the universe is. God or no God or 10 gods. It's learning the lay of the land, learning the state of things, the actual state of things, not the fantastical state of things that religion or science or academic philosophy or theology teaches. It's all wrong. To me, that's the most revolutionary thing about spiritualism. It throws everything out. Everything. All those belief systems, they're all wrong. And I think that's why it was so threatening, and I think why it's still not really accepted. Because priests and bishops and popes, they recognize that their advice and their law-giving and their moralities, they're a sideshow. They really are a sideshow. Self-justifying sideshow. Same with science. It's even worse. We thought religion was bad. Now we got science. There are no favourites or privileged ones, and those considered great on earth are not necessarily so afterwards. Always the motive of an action counts. In the many ways, of course that's the Buddhists for you. It's not the action, it's the motive. Well, at least they got something right. The many ways and different degrees by which some of our brethren throughout history have made the lives of their fellow humans miserable are well known, and range from mental torture to extreme physical agony. We tend to blame these guilty ones, but more advanced spirits feel sorry for them. I was taken to a better state before returning to my physical body. The next morning I was in a hurry and bustle, opening parcels before opening my shop door, when I was suddenly, gently but firmly, compelled to sit in a chair. Then, with bowed head in my hands and elbows on knees, I experienced the most intense and deepest sorrow for a loved one that it is possible to feel. I was so full of pity that I had the utmost difficulty in preventing the tears from flowing. The loved one was the dictator head of a country. Interesting. Regaining some composure and feeling the gentle presence of a high spirit, I mentally asked, why do I have to feel like this? And was told, you have been to the place where he is going. This happened in 1937 and there was no actual threat of war. I need hardly say that this kind of emotion for a dictator was not normal for my nature, and I was glad that my shop was not open. This enveloping soul was a spirit from a high sphere whose love and deep pity for such a one on earth gave me cause to think a lot during the rest of the day. The great but gentle power that overcame me, although I was physically active at the time, surprised me, as I have never experienced it on earth before. The hopelessness of those I had contacted during the night was so ghastly and desolate that only spirit experience can know the extent of it. It cannot be described in words. I hope there is some turning point for those poor souls, for ever is a long time. There seems to be a certain simplicity in spiritual truths, and we go a long way round to find them. We're all part of a whole, and everyone is wanted. The more mistakes that are made, the more the concern there is for the one who makes them. The gentleness and concern for others by those who have reached the high spheres is, as I have tried to make clear, very deep, and it is unselfishness and consideration for all that is simply and truly the reason for their elevation to the higher vibration in the spirit realms. Well, I think we've reached our time limit now. Part 3, Frederick Sculthorp. Thank you, sir. I'm sure you're doing well now. You've been dead a long time. And more very soon. And more chatter from me in between, doubtless. Like I say, the afterlife is for everyone. And all you have to do to get there is die. It's that simple. So long, compadres.